Hello, my name is Lee Richmond, Professor of Education at Loyola University, Maryland. I'm here with Nancy Leatherman, Technology Support Specialist for the School of Education. Today we will discuss career as care, new definitions and theory incorporating meaning and purpose. The series is formatted in such a way so that at the end of each module, time may be provided for discussion. I hope you learn from the video and enjoy watching it. Career has been defined differently through the centuries. Until the last century, it was not defined at all. But since then, it's taken on many definitions. The slide that you see is the definition that was used through the first half of the last century, and it's still used by some people today. But it defines the word work and not the word career. It is not how most people think of career today. Literally, the word career means a way, a journey. No longer is the professional conversation simply about jobs. The definition has become one that encompasses one's journey through life. As early as the 1970s, people began talking about career as work plus leisure. By the 1980s, Donald Super expanded the definition. The thought about career as care is implicit in Super's definition. The life-career rainbow that you see in this slide looks at all the roles one plays and how much time is devoted to each one of the roles. Super's theory also looks into where one wants to play these roles and with whom. David and Hannah Tiedemann took a step further and spoke about life career. This definition was popularized in the 90s. And it expands career as caring for the self and the wider world. The Tiedemann theory, along with Sonny Hansen's theory of integrative life-work planning, takes into consideration that when we think about career development, we need to think about the work that the world needs doing. When one thinks of career as a carrier of meaning, care and career is fully understood. All people need a sense of purpose in their lives. Prediction based on abilities, interests, and so forth, emphasizing that career involves the shaping of a direction and the teaching and learning of skills and how to get to where one wants to go, is currently used but is de-emphasized. And what is emphasized is career as story, as narrative. Self-reliance is becoming extremely important. Today and in the future, there will be more emphasis on the relationship between career and health. Like career counseling, mental health counseling is concerned with meaning and purpose. People who have a sense of the connection between self and that which is greater than self seem to do much better in adjusting to what life brings. Counselors will use story as well as objective measures when working with clients. What people think about themselves, an internal sense of who they are is going to be extremely important to career counselors as we combine the subjective with the objective in the work that we do.
Why has the definition of careers changed?
Well, Nancy, I think it's because the times have changed. 100 years ago, people weren't thinking about definitions of career. As a matter of fact, they were just beginning to include the subject of work in social work and in counseling. But as time has changed, the definition has broadened, and as more people have thought about it and thought about it from different angles, the definition has changed in a sense to meet the times. But I think there's an important thing here, and that is during the latter part of the last century, there was a depression, sort of, and there was an article in a newspaper about two people who died. He killed her and then killed himself because they had no work. People were defining themselves by the work they do. I'm just a this, I'm just a that. And when there is no work and you don't see your value as a person, so professionals have sort of changed it to career not as just job, but as life. It's how we live that gives value to us. And I think the counseling profession is really caught up with the world in changing the definition from work to career as life and all the roles we play in life. We talked a bit about spirituality in part one when we talked about purpose and meaning. There's a book that was written by Bowman and Deal called Leading with Soul that I think lends a lot to our thought about finding care in career. So what you're going to see in the next couple of slides are some statements from the book that Bowman and Deal wrote. Bowman and Deal talked a lot about the spiritual journey as being an inward journey. One begins that journey from wherever one is. One can't be anyone except oneself. Look very deeply into your everyday life to find your own deepest treasures. Think for a moment. What are they? Caring for others can come out of one's own sorrow. Research shows that when tragedy hits, 1/3 of the population never recovers. A third comes back to where things were before, but another third rises above where they were before. In which third do you fall? Here's your chance to tell your story. Feel free to stop the video at this point and speak. Spirituality also transcends the ordinary. Think about ordinary things such as a sunset on a warm summer day or the beauty of a baby's smile. Religion helps some people. It helps some people to have something out there to believe in. But so does nature, and so does human kindness. Prayer is conversation with your soul. Carl Jung would say that it's your conscious self talking to the self that resides in your collective unconscious. You don't have to be a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, or a Hindu to pray. When you pray, you're talking to your deepest self. To hold deeply to anything or anyone is to lose everything. Think of your heroes. They may be your family. What are the extraordinary things they have done? In what ways are you like your heroes? Finding the care in career is significant. Helping others is value added. Living is giving. The topic of career is care is all about this slide. Spirit is the care that you give to yourself and to others. Life is a journey. It's a journey to find your true self. And when you do, you'll soar. So those are the thoughts from Bowman and Deal, talking about the importance of spirituality. You might want to go back and look at those questions and see how you relate to each of the slides.
You define spirituality separate from religion. Can you expand on that?
Spirituality means something different than religion. Spirituality is transcendent. It goes beyond the bounds of any single religion, and it inheres inside the person. Religion is a social set of practices. Religion has laws and rules and rituals to it. Spirituality has none of those. But there's some questions with this, and that is, can one be spiritual and not be religious? Some people think that's not possible. I think it's entirely possible. And tests that have been done on religiosity and spirituality show that some people are spiritual and religious. Some people are spiritual and not religious. And strange as it may sound, some people are religious and not spiritual at all. So again, when you're thinking of spirituality, you're thinking of something that is transcendent, and religion as something that's particular to a group of people who have certain rituals and rules.
Thank you.
I love this slide. I'm told that it wasn't photoshopped. She's a real dancer. To find the care in career, we may not be dancers, but we must live with joy. A person by the name of Jennifer James wrote a book called Thinking in the Future Tense. I like the one about myths. There are old myths and there are new myths. And we need to discard the old myths if we're going to bring in some new myths. Most of you have seen the movie Snow White. In the movie Snow White, there are 7 dwarfs, 7 dirty little men. And Snow White comes in and cleans them up and cleans up their house. The myth is that one woman can clean up 7 dirty little men. There's another myth in Snow White. It's the myth of the prince that brings the sleeping Snow White back to life. That's the old myth. Some of you may have seen the movie Frozen. In the movie Frozen, the heroine isn't kissed by a prince at all, but is kissed by her sister. It shows that women can help women become heroines. Thinking about the roles that people play in life, think about your own. What roles have you played in your life? The roles you're playing now, where you are now, and what you want to be. These are questions that we can ask our counselees. Where do we want to be, not just where we have been? Here's a picture of Super's Life Career Rainbow. You've seen this picture before. In a workshop, you can give an uncolored picture of the rainbow and let clients color in the way they see their lives. This is Super's rainbow in a different form. If you think of the lines progressing from the center, with the center as a 0 and the end of each vector as a 10, You can draw how much time you spend in each area of your life. Then you can ask yourself if you're happy with it as it is. Perhaps you want to change something. Counseling takes place in the gap between where you are and where you want to be, between how things are and what you want to change. We all need balance in life, but balance doesn't have to look like a circle. If you're happy with the way things were in the past slide, in the previous slide, your life is balanced no matter what the diagram looks like. When one carries balloons in the wind can blow. When one carries many things in life, so it is with the wind as well. These balloons represent the demands of self, of others, and of circumstances. At times they're all the same size, and at other times they're not. Sometimes the self is big, sometimes the other takes over, and sometimes the circumstance is what we put our attention to. Think about the size of balloons in your life right now. Remember that you can balance any and all of these, but not without motion. Just as motion is needed to balance a teeter-totter or a seesaw, motion is needed to balance our lives. I love this slide. Notice how it's space that gives definition to the objects in the slide. It's the space between the words that makes the words make sense, just as it's the space between music notes that gives definition to them. The space between our activities often gives definition to what we do. Interests, knowledge, and skills, they're all important, but we have to filter them through our values if there's to be meaning in our life. An exercise that I like to do with people is to think about what they enjoyed doing in childhood. Think about what you played with, and how does that fit your life right now? For example, when I was a child, I liked to pick up pieces of paper found in alleyways, found in streets, and if they had writing on it, I liked to decipher that writing. Now bear in mind that I couldn't read at all, but I made up stories about that writing. Today, I like to figure out people's lives. I like to work with forensic cases. You have to, again, figure out what doesn't have meaning when you first see it. It's not the toy itself that's so important. It's what you enjoy doing when you were playing with it. So, what are the activities that you engage in now? What are the activities that bring you through life? What connects your story in your journey through life? Energy is all around us. It's important to know where we get ours. Sometimes we get energy from the culture. Sometimes we get energy from the community at large. And there's always energy in the cosmos. It's important that we surround ourselves with people and things that give us energy, and avoid as far as we can those that don't. When we surround ourselves with people that give us energy, we bring joy into our lives. When we bring into our adulthood what had meaning to us in childhood, we bring meaning into our lives. When we allow ourselves the space between so that we can think about what we do and how it affects us, we begin to understand the joy that we bring into our lives.
You talk about space between as transition space. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, I think transition space is one of the most important concepts in psychology. If you go back to childhood, a baby has to transition between mom, mom being there and mom leaving. When mom first goes away, mom gives baby a blankie or a teddy bear or something and says, "Hold on to this until I get back." We call that a transitional object. If there were no transition space, baby would not learn to be without mommy. It's and it's in that space where creativity, where originality begins. So there's always a space between being and becoming. There's always a space between where we are now and where we're going. And as a matter of fact, I'll give you a religious example and then a counseling example. In religion, when Moses went up the mountain to get the Ten Commandments, if you remember, the people below in the mountain, the ancient Hebrews, were making a golden calf. A golden calf is solid. There's no room in it. You just worship. That's all you can do with it. If you remember, Moses broke the commandments because of the golden calf and the people's disobedience. And he went back up and he got another set. And they were not put in anything solid. They were put in the Ark of the Covenant. And all that was there was the Ten Commandments. And from that, all the religions of the Western world grew. So it's in space, it's in the space between that creativity occurs, that things can happen. Again, as I said on the tape, you wouldn't be able to play a musical composition if you didn't have a space between. So that space between, if you apply it to counseling, between the being and the becoming, between where we are now and where we're going, is where counseling takes place. And just as the teddy bear was the transitional object for the baby, the counselor is the transitional object for the client.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Matthew Fox, an Episcopalian priest, wrote what I think might be the greatest book ever written in career development. He called the book The Reinvention of Work. And his thesis is that we have to join in the great work of the universe. When we think of career as care, we think of it as giving meaning to life. And when we think of activities that give meaning to life, we participate in ongoing creation. Tiedemann widened the definition of career to be as broad as it could be. His wife, Anna Miller Tiedemann, said that we should think of career not as job, but as life. And we should think not of a self-concept, but of a self-conceiving. Traditional wisdom tells us to find a direction and then let go of what we have. But perhaps more wise is to let go, because if we let go, then we are free to find direction any place that we seek it. Deborah Block and I wrote a book called Connection Between Spirit and Career. And in that book, we said that career is often illogical, nonlinear, and non-localized. What we meant by that is often what we expect to happen does not happen. Not everything follows a logical path. Often strange attractors come in and take us away from places and people that we know. In the same book, we talk about how career paths include synchronicity, uncertainty, and complementarity. Things just seem to happen. Things just fall into place is what synchronicity tells us. There's some new theory out now called uncertainty theory. H.B. Gillette talks about that theory, and Krumboltz calls it happenstance. What we can deduce from this is that the universe is always working, and things happen for us if we pay attention to them. In a later book that Debbie and I did called Soul Work, we talk about 7 dimensions that form a model of career. We talk about change, balance, energy, community, calling, harmony, and unity. The slides that follow will talk about each one of these things individually. Change always happens, so we need to expect it. We need to think about the fact that counseling takes place in the gaps between the now and the future. Creativity also occurs in these gaps. We talked before about transitional space. That's the space where we move from one thing to another. That's the space that marks the new change. Also mentioned before is the fact that we have to balance ourselves, but we can't balance ourselves standing still. We have to move. Thinking of counseling, balance is the place between where things are now and what's to emerge. That's when we have to move. We can't stay still. Nothing will emerge. We need to understand, even as we talk about energy, that balance is not a place, but a process. And energy is what gives us the momentum to move through that process. We need to rely on multiple sources of energy and see life as waves of energy. But perhaps what's most important is that we have to accept that there are conflicting ideas that sometimes come to us in life, conflicting opinions. And are they really opposites, or are they complementary? Think for a moment. Out of sight, out of mind. Add to that, absence makes the heart grow fonder, which is true. They're really not opposites. They're complements of each other. Sometimes one is true, sometimes the other is true. And they can even be true of the exact same person. Even someone we love, out of sight, sometimes is out of our mind. But when they're out of sight too long, then we miss them and the heart grows fonder. So it's important as we think of energy that we think of complements of things and not just opposites of things. Another important item to consider when we consider career as care is community. What kind of community brings us to life and what deadens us? Again, it's extremely important if we're going to live with joy, something we talked about before, to bring ourselves to life and place ourselves in a community where that can happen. Calling is another dimension. It used to be that when we talked about calling, we would think about the ministry or a call to something in spiritual life. But calling is listening to our own internal voice. Some people are called to bake cakes. Other people are called to sew. Other people are called to bowl. The important thing is valuing our knowledge of self, valuing our intuition, trusting ourselves and examining our life in the light of our values. Happiness comes from following one's calling. Harmony. Harmony is something we seek. Harmony with ourselves and harmony with others. Harmony in the world. we need to find multiple ways of finding this harmony by paying attention to the external realities around us. Last, but perhaps most important, is unity. It comes from recognizing all the others. Unity is about loving our work, loving others, loving our lives, and accepting the connectedness of all things in the one. Remember, before each of us is a choice. That choice is written in the book of Deuteronomy in the scriptures. We are told that we can either choose life and the blessing, or the opposite and the curse. To find the care and career is to choose life. If we do that, we're told that we live more abundantly. At least we'll live more happily.
Why did you and Dr. Black come up with 7 connectors?
It seemed a pretty natural thing to do, but we liked the number of 7, and actually what we were thinking of is 7, 7, whatever you call them, in a candelabra. They're usually in the candelabra that's used in synagogues. There's 7 candle holders, really. There's 7 days of the week. 7 is a number that's used often throughout both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. So we picked 7 as a number that's very common, but very often one that really connects people to universe, to creation, 7 days of the week, all of that. So we just liked it.
Very interesting.
You don't have to be religious to be spiritual, but religions do have views about the place of work in human life. From a theological point of view, the key issue of work is its meaning. Religion has looked at work in 4 different ways. Matthew Fox wrote another book called Original Blessing. It's also connected with the nexus between spirit and work. Work as a vocation or calling was for a long time predicted of professional ministry, although many people now believe that their work is their calling. Work as punishment comes from Scripture. Garden of Eden, and some Christian sects actually see it in that way. Most of us look at work as a necessity, and this is how most religions view it as well. If you look at it that way, the Torah establishes leisure and work very early in the book of Genesis. When Adam and Eve are banished from the Garden of Eden, they and their progeny through all time are told that they must earn their living by the sweat of their brow. But it's interesting that even before God spoke of work, he created leisure. The Sabbath was established at creation, and it's the one holy day that the Creator himself observed. It occurs 52 times each year, and it's a time of total rest. Everyone is free from labor, whether Jew or Gentile, slave or free. Traditionally, the Hebrew people believed that creation is perfect. and that they rest on the seventh day so as not to interfere with its perfection. Well, you can see this is Moses with the Ten Commandments. And again, the commandment is not only that you, but everyone who works for you should cease their labor on the Sabbath. The commandment shows care not only for people, but for animals as well. Ultimately, the goal is to be grateful, to transform this world into a place of joy. Throughout the centuries, the Jewish people have kept the Sabbath. And it's believed that it's the Sabbath that has kept the Jewish people. Do you have a Sabbath? Do you take time away from work to rest? Now, a lot of people think that the Torah is a scroll, and it is. And the Hebrew people have always read it in the synagogue. But the Torah is more than a scroll. The Hebrew Bible itself is called the Tanakh. And that's not just the 5 books of Moses. That's more than that. But additionally, in addition to the Tanakh, there's a whole oral law that contains something called the Mishnah and the Gemara. These books comprise the Talmud. Tradition says that all of this was given to Moses at Mount Sinai and passed down from generation to generation. Tradition says that hundreds of years later, there was a fear that something might be lost. So everything was written down and codified. Now, higher scholarship, of course, does not hold to this story. And all but the most Orthodox Jews don't hold to the story, interesting though it may be. The fact is that Jewish law, like all law, has to be adapted to changing situations, especially when the Jews were no longer in Israel, no longer on the land. In any case, the laws as adapted have much to say about caring behavior, particularly that which people should value. What you're looking at now is pictures of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, and what is actually in them are the 5 books of Moses that people think of as the Torah, but also the prophets and the other writings, just such as the Psalms. This is a slide of the Talmud. Notice how many more books they are. This is the oral law. The faith of the Jew is not a way out of the world, but a way of living within it. The idea is not to reject, but to enrich and surpass civilization itself. Interesting about Judaism is that it's a religion of time. We moderns tend to concentrate more on space than on time. Our lives are full of objects, but holiness takes place in time, not space, though we sanctify objects. The Sabbath is time out of time, time taken from time to appreciate, to be thankful. I wanted to show you this slide. It's the oral law and how it's written. You see one book called the oral law, but in fact, you see that all of it's written around the sides of the slides that you're looking at that are written in Hebrew as rabbinic commentary on the Tanakh. It's commentary on top of commentary on top of commentary. And as the world changed, how we live in it changes. Here's another slide I love. When a man appears before the throne of judgment, the first question that is asked is not have you believed in God or have you prayed and observed the ritual, even though all of that ritual was written down is important. But the question that's asked is, how did you deal with your fellow man? How did you feel? How did you deal with your fellow person, man and woman? How did you deal with life? This slide is about the Pirkei Avot. The Pirkei Avot is translated as Ethics of the Fathers or Sayings of the Fathers. Essentially, it says that the world rests on three pillars: on Torah, on worship, and on loving deeds. When it talks about Torah, it talks about understanding how to live, and that involves study, learning. On worship, it talks about giving praise and thanksgiving, and that involves leisure. On loving deeds and compassion, we're talking about social justice and mercy. And if you think about this and you think about modern career development, where we're not talking about work just as labor, aren't these things very much like what we're trying to teach when we talk about work, learning, leisure, family, social justice? To do social justice, to give charity, to study, to improve the self, all of this is what the three pillars define. We can't back away from caring about self and others. No one person can do it all, but each person must do all that he or she can. A person's work should benefit society. Other than on the Sabbath, a person should do work, but the kind of work that a person can do is clearly defined. It should be a benefit. It should be constructive. It should give time for spiritual pursuits. It shouldn't tempt us to cheat or be dishonest or engage in sexual morality. That is what we mean when we say it should not be a curse. Now, what about money? In Fiddler on the Roof, there's a very famous saying, and it is, poverty is not a sin, but it's no great blessing either. Money can be a tool that can help one lead a holy life if it's used for such things as scholarships and hospitals and research efforts, lifting the lives of those who are less fortunate. Work for money alone is not a Jewish value, but working for some of the things that money can buy, as was just mentioned, is a Jewish value. Again, working 6 days a week so that one can have a Sabbath on the seventh day is enabling if one uses the Sabbath to study or pray, but above all, to appreciate. In Judaism, one should work to live, not live to work. Choosing an occupation never was a trivial thing because it can affect the time that a person has left for spiritual pursuits, for doing good, for caring. However, one needs to balance the work that one does for money with leisure, care of the body, care for important relationships, for study, for learning, for prayer. And by the way, the Sabbath in Judaism is on Saturday. Christians celebrate a Sabbath on Sunday. But if you have to work on Saturday or Sunday, there's no reason why a Sabbath can't be kept on a Wednesday. Think about it. Okay, you're now going to see a film clip from the movie Fiddler on the Roof, where Tevye is singing a now famous song called If I Were a Rich Man. Listen to the words to the song, and after that, I have an important question to ask you.
If I were a rich man, yabba dibba 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 dum. All day long I biddy biddy bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Yabba dibba 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 dum. If I were a biddy biddy rich, idle diddle 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 man, I see my wife, my Goldie, looking like a rich man's wife with a proper double chin. Supervising meals to her heart's delight. I see her putting on airs and strutting like a peacock. Oh, what a happy mood she's in. Screaming at the servants day and night. The most important man in town will come to fawn on me. They will ask me to advise them like a Solomon the wise. If you please, Rebetavia, pardon me, Rebetavia, posing problems that would cross a rabbi's eyes. And it won't make one bit of difference if I answer right or wrong. When you're rich, they think you really know. If I were rich, I'd have the time that I like to sit in the synagogue and pray, and maybe have a seat by the eastern wall. And I discuss the holy books with the learned men 7 hours every day. And that would be the sweetest thing of all.
The question I have is, was Tevye the quintessential Jew? And also, was Tevye the dairyman, in fact, a wealthy man, just as he was? You decide. There are many statements, and I think I've told you some, that link Jewish spirituality to life as career and care. View the world as mystery, because the works of our Creator are beyond our understanding. View life as meaningful and as a lesson in gratitude. Do charity. Tzedakah is a word for that. Something that you owe, something that you actually owe the world, not as a generosity. See body and mind and spirit as gifts. Believe that all people bear the special signature of God that transcends and is yet immanent. View work as career, but know that learning, family, community, and leisure are also career. And ultimately, view your career as a carrier of meaning.
Connecting Judaism to career and career to caring is very new to me. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, it is kind of new, and I think it's probably new to everybody. But the whole idea is, as I saw it, is that if you think of those 3 pillars, is that life is not all labor, that life is not all work, that life is work, learning, leisure. It is the same as the 3 pillars that we saw here. It is your work, yes, but what is your work? Your work is to sanctify, to learn, to live well. So I saw all those things as very much connected. Mm-hmm. And I think to care, if we do sanctify, then we do care. If we live a life where, sure, money is important, mm-hmm. but how money is used is more important. That's caring. So mm-hmm. it connects to career at the highest and most base points. Judaism talks about how we use money and also about how we shouldn't use money, how our lives should be lived. And I think that's what life career is about. I think that's also, I think, what Super was talking about. So I don't think I connected them. I think the connection was pretty natural. But intentionally, I did it for this video and for some classes that I teach, because I think people don't usually connect religion to career. And I think the connection is really natural.
Very interesting. Thank you.
כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, כל העולם כולו גשר